Good morning, good afternoon. Today we are going to be presenting a topic which is genetic programming, also known as GP, which is an evolutionary strategy that lets computers write and improve their own programs to solve problems as part of Homework 3.3. It is worth mentioning that this team is from Campus Guadalajara, and it's me, which is Emmanuel, Juan Pablo, and Alberto. Okay, so we will start with the core idea. So one of the hardest problems in artificial intelligence is actually getting a computer to find a solution without telling it in advance what the solution should look like. So genetic programming solves this by borrowing an idea straight from biological evolution. GP keeps a population of computer programs. Then each generation, it measures how good every program is at solving the task. So that's what we call fitness, right? And select the best ones to become patterns. Those patterns combine and mutate to create a new generation, and this cycle just keeps repeating until the population converge on a good solution, or we simply run out of time, right? So that's exactly the 5 steps loops you see on the right of the screen. So basically, we generate, we evaluate, we select, we apply crossover and mutation, and of course, form a new generation. Now, with the information we have until now, it could seem that genetic programming is just another genetic algorithm. However, this is not the case, since a genetic algorithm involves a fixed length string of value. We could think as tuning a set of numbers or parameters, and in the other hand, genetic programming involves the program itself. It's kind of like a tree-shaped structure that can be directly executed. This single difference cascades into everything else. GA's crossover swaps equal length segments, while GP's crossover swaps subtrees of different size. A GA can accidentally create an invalid string that needs to be repaired, and GP3, because operator respects its structure, usually stays valid. And because GP's program can grow or shrink freely, its search space is open-ended, which, as we'll see later, of course, it brings its own challenges. So if I have to say it in one sentence, the difference, I would say that GA, which is genetic algorithm, searches for the best set of values, while genetic programming searches for the best program. Okay, so we will make this concrete with the actual algorithm. On the left, you will see the pseudocode. Of course, this is a general pseudocode of the genetic programming. So first of all, we start by generating a random initial population of programs. It's important that we call these programs, since this is the specific or most important part of this genetic programming. So once we do that, or we create those programs using a method like full, grow, or ramped half and half, which just control how varied the initial three shapes are. Then we enter the main loop. So first, every program in the population is executed against our training cases, and we compute its fitness. Usually, some measures of error between what the program outputs and what we wanted. Next comes the part of that drives evolution. We built a new population by repeatedly choosing one of three operators. About 90% of the time, we apply crossover, which where we pick two fit patterns and swap a random subtree between them. And then about 1% of the time we apply mutation, which take one pattern and replace a random subtree with a freshly generated one. The rest of the time we simply reproduce, which is just copy a fit individual unchanged. Then we repeat this whole cycle until we hit a termination criterion. Either we found a program that's good enough or we used up our generation budget. And then, of course, we return the best program found. When we say programs in evolutionary programming, we are actually referring to something we call syntax tree, which we will see here, or you can see on the right of this slide. So we will explain it as as a tree. The internal nodes are functions. Here we have max, times, and plus. And then the leaves are terminals, variables like x and y, or constants like the number 3. And this 3 is literally the expression max of x times x, comma, x plus 3 y. So you can read it top to bottom and execute it directly. It is important mentioning that no decoding step is needed. So two properties matter when we design this kind of representation. The first one is that the set has to be closed. This means that any function can safely take any other function output as input, and it has to be sufficient, meaning it's actually rich enough to express a solution to our problem. Get either one of these wrong, and GP simply won't be able to find what you're looking for.
Now we are moving to primitives and population initialization. To build these trees, GP needs two ingredients. A function set, here arithmetic operators, string function, and conditional logic. And a terminal set, or variables, constants, and what are called ephemeral random constants, which just means randomly generated numeric values baked into the tree. So for the first generation, before any evolution has happened, we need to generate trees from scratch, full build trees that hit the maximum depth on every branch, bushy and uniform. Grow build trees of various shapes and sizes, and ramped half and half, which is the most commonly used method. Then the mixes both approaches across a range of depths, which gives the initial population much more structural diversity to work with. And now moving to the next slide, we have the genetic operators, which are the crossover and mutation. Now these two operators that actually drive evolution. So crossover is the dominant operator at roughly 90% of the time. Takes two parent trees, picks a random subtree in each, and swaps them, producing two new offspring. Because subtrees can be different sizes, this is also where a program size can start to grow or shrink. So about mutation is used only about 1% of the time. Whereas on a single parent, it picks one random subtree and replaces it entirely with a newly generated one. Its job isn't to combine good traits. Instead, it's actually to inject fresh genetic material so the population doesn't get stuck exploring the same narrow set of ideas. And together, these two operators plus straightforward reproduction are really the entire engine of GP's search. Parameters and termination criterion. Before running GP, you have to configure a few key parameters. First, it will be the population size, typically hundreds to thousands of individuals. And then we have maximum tree depth, which depends heavily on the problem. And finally, maximum generations, commonly somewhere between 10 and 50 for many problems, though this varies widely in practice. The run terminates either when we hit our target fitness or when we exhaust the generation budget. And there's a real trade-off here. Too small a population risks converting prematurely on a mediocre solution, while too shallow a depth limit can make it impossible to express the answer at all. And now we have the example application, which is the fingerprint matching. Let's ground all of this in a real application. In one study, researchers used GP to analyze fingerprints specifically to find explicit mathematical formulas describing minute points. These mathematical formulas were the rich endings and bifurcations extracted using the crossing number method. And the setup, a population of 2,500 programs evolved over 1,700 generations, starting from trees with an initial maximum depth of 6. Rich endings were described using 3 variables, and bifurcation used 5. The fitness goal was simple to state but hard to achieve, minimize the error between the formulas predicted y coordinate and the actual one, given x and the reach angles. And GP succeeded. It evolved these two formulas you see here, one for reach endings and one for bifurcations directly from the data, with no one-handed designing them. Success in approximation and human competitive design. Let's look at the results, starting with simpler benchmarks from approximating sinus x through symbolic regression. GP's best solution reached an error of just 1.88 after 99 generations. You can see on the chart how closely the evolved function track the true sin curve. For an even simpler quadratic target, GP found the exact solution, zero error in a single generation. But GP's track record goes well beyond toy programs. It has produced more than 60 results considered human competitive, meaning they match or beat solutions designed by human experts. That includes 23 patentable inventions, two of which were entirely novel, and most striking, an award-winning X-band antenna design that NASA actually deployed.
Back to our fingerprint case study. Did the both formulas actually work? We tested them against a query fingerprint and three candidates. Look at the image 7b. Its predicted white values match the query almost exactly for both reach endings and bifurcations. A correct match. The other two candidates, 7a and 7c, show clear deviations, correctly rejected. One more practical point, GP can be computationally expensive, since you're evaluating thousands of programs every generation. But running that fitness evaluations on GPU instead on CPUs achieves speedups of 7 point times to 12 point times faster, enough to evaluate a quarter million GP trees in parallel. That's what makes GP practical at a scale. One well-known challenge in GP is called bloat. Programs growing in size across generations without any real gain in fitness. You can see it clearly on this chart. Without any control, average program size explodes. With a parsimony penalty added to the fitness function, growth stays much flatter. Three theories try to explain why this happens. Crossover statistically favors larger programs. Larger programs, redundant programs, are more resistant to being broke by mutation. And simply, there are exponentially more long programs than short ones for any given function. To be fair, this fingerprint study has real limitations. Small test set of only three candidates, no quantitative error metrics reported, and no comparison against the existing state-of-the-art matching algorithms. Evolved formulas can also be genuinely hard for humans to interpret. Still, GP remains a powerful general-purpose strategy. It formalizes the search process, handles competing objectives like accuracy versus program size through Pareto optimization, and benefits from diversity-preserving techniques that prevent premature convergence. To wrap up, generic programming automates discovery. It extracts symbolic model straight from data. As we saw with fingerprint formulas, it is a fundamentally different paradigm from genetic algorithms, trading a bounded, simpler space for the ability to evolve fully executable programs. It has delivered real patentable human competitive results. And while it still faces open challenges, bloat, computational cost, generalization from small datasets, active research keeps pushing those boundaries with tools like parsimony control, GPU parallelism, and multi-objective optimization. Genetic programming, it is in short a Darwinian invention machine, and we think is one of the more elegant ideas in evolutionary computation. Thank you, and we'll be happy to take any questions.